There's so much confusion about where Deion Sanders, Colorado, and where the rest of the Pac-12 is going to be in 2024. I'm going to talk about that on today's episode of Locked On Buffs.
You are Locked On Buffs, your daily podcast on the Colorado Buffaloes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? This is Locked On Buffs, and joining me today, special guest John Canzano. John is my Pac-12 insider, my Pac-12 realignment guru, and while many people on social media are always coming at him because I don't feel like they read everything, he does know a lot of things about everything that we've been talking about for this past year. John, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, you bet. You know what? And I don't blame people. I mean, this is new, right? Yeah. Like I wasn't in this business to cover media rights and to cover grant of rights and to understand television households and market size. And but that's where we are. And I think the sooner we can get back to talking about the football, the better for all of us. But this is all important stuff. And, you know, I don't totally blame people who are a little foggy or need to be educated, because that's where I was like 9-10 months ago.
Yeah, believe it or not, John is just a guy trying to cover some Oregon and Oregon State football and talk about the Pac-12. But here we are. John, I appreciate you for joining us again. Today, we're talking about Colorado's importance to the Pac-12. Where's Deion Sanders? Where's Coach Prime in Colorado going to be in 2024? That's kind of been the big discussion. They're the wavering program. We're going to talk about the Pac-12 media rights agreement, what they agree to, what it actually means, and what it doesn't mean yet. And then we're going to talk about Travis Hunter. He was offered a big bag to go elsewhere, but he still ended up sticking with Colorado and Coach Prime. So, without further ado, John, Colorado has kind of been the program wavering. They kind of feel like the potential straw to break the camel's back, if you will. Excuse me, just had like a mini seizure right there. They're kind of the team that everybody's looking at. Everybody's expecting them to leave or do something. They've had meetings with their regents boards and all that pizzazz. What is going on with Colorado?
Yeah, I think Colorado's doing what everybody else is doing. It's just become a little more public because they are a school probably that the Big 12 conference would really want. Like, let's just back up. Oregon and Washington have done some of the same diligence. They've hired consulting firms. I've talked with those firms. I've talked with sources at both schools, administrative sources and people in the Pac-12 CEO group. Everybody's doing their diligence. Anybody who tells you they're not doing their diligence is not paying attention. But some of it is just, formula, right? Oregon doesn't really pencil out for the Big Ten conference. The media market in Portland and the state of Oregon, not big enough right now to get the attention of the Big Ten. So, access to the college football playoff becomes important to Oregon and Washington. Meanwhile, you got the Four Corners schools, probably much more coveted by the Big 12 because they make more sense geographically for the Big 12. So I think the only reason we're hearing more about the Colorado stuff is because of that and because it's become more public. And Rick George, the athletic director, and the university president, the chancellor there, have both been on record saying, hey, they have to do what's best for Colorado. I do hear them saying that staying in the Pac-12 conference and getting a good media number is what's best for Colorado. But I think some of what we've seen in the last couple of weeks is I think Colorado's trying to placate the portion of the fan base, maybe even the coaching staff, maybe even Coach Prime, who really want to recruit Texas and maybe get into Florida in a different way, but simultaneously trying to figure out what is right for Colorado. And, I'm on record. I think the 10 schools are going to stay together. I think Colorado's going to be in the Pac-12, but let's talk all about that.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing about Colorado, too, that I always mention is Colorado has to do everything publicly as well. They have to go through public forums. It's a whole governmental kind of thing. But the thing that kind of, I think, confuses people with Colorado is they keep saying that, like you even mentioned it, too, because that's kind of the argument right now is Coach Prime wants access to Texas. I hate to break it to all the people who are very adamant about him getting access to Texas. He has access to wherever he wants. That won't change. He's bringing kids from Florida. I think if I had to do a rough estimation of the roster, I think 60 to 70% of these kids are from Florida or a southern state. So they have a big chunk of these kids from wherever they want. And so I think that's something to look out for. The other thing, too, is you mentioned it, and I think it needs to be hammered on even more. Rick George is doing whatever is important or whatever is right for Colorado. I think at the end of the day, everybody's in the business for themselves, regardless of what field we're in. We all do something that benefits us one way or another. And Colorado is no different than all of us trying to boost our careers or, I guess, advance in the world. I think Colorado is literally just trying to make sure that come 2024, they're not caught sitting there with nowhere to go and nowhere to be, I guess, in a conference. I had one more question about this, though. We talked about Colorado and how they want to be in the Pac-12 unless all things go wrong. The Four Corner Schools feels like it's turned into the Four Corner Schools, aka Colorado, Arizona, then UConn and Gonzaga. What is kind of the situation with Utah and Arizona State? I don't feel like they're kind of mentioned anymore.
Yeah, because I think they're adamant, and their presidents and their athletic directors have been adamant about their position in the Pac-12. Like, look, I have access to some of the presidents and chancellors who are in that room, and I've talked to them. I can tell you that Utah and Arizona State have been outspoken in that room about, they believe in the Pac-12 conference. Colorado has as well, and so has Arizona. And anybody who tells you any different is not talking to presidents who are in that room. Here's the thing, though, that I think we all have to step back and go, okay, look, what motivates and what causes conference realignment and expansion? Okay. When you look historically at these realignment expansion moves, they are earthquakes. They are massive earthquakes. 7.9 earthquake when Texas and Oklahoma say they're going to the SEC. 8.2 earthquake when USC and UCLA go to the Big Ten. Those are earthquake moves because those are huge brands with huge TV markets attached to them, large national following. The LA TV market's 5.6 million households. The Big Ten Conference didn't want UCLA and USC. It wanted LA. It wanted LA in the same way that it wanted New York City. That's why they grabbed Rutgers. And don't tell me that Rutgers doesn't rate New York City. It doesn't matter. The TV executives will tell you UCLA doesn't rate in LA either. You're buying TV households when you're bringing those brands into your conference. And it's the same reason that they grabbed Maryland, the Big Ten Conference. They grabbed Maryland because they wanted Washington, D.C. Now, so those big moves, those are cataclysmic moves that conferences make. There aren't those moves left for the teams that are in the Pac-12 conference. So the only thing that would cause a realignment or teams to leave is if the Pac-12's TV deal completely fell apart. And it's why I think there are some motivated parties out there who have continually fueled that narrative. It's a false narrative. At no point were they completely falling apart. I think the only point I ever heard any wavering in the last 10, 11 months was when Oregon and Washington were very quiet for a few months right out of the gate. And they were trying to assess, where do they belong? Should they be in the SEC? Should they be in the Big Ten? They were having those conversations internally and with their consultants, and they were trying to figure out where they fit. And I did have one Pac-12 school tell me if Oregon and Washington bolt, everyone's running for the hills. So I think that the Big 12 was sitting back going, look, that's our best chance to get Colorado back, to get Utah. They'd love to have Utah, Colorado, Arizona State. Those are better schools, better universities, better media markets than the programs that they've recently added. So they were definitely motivated to get it done. But if this conference stays intact, and I think it will, I'm being told by members of the CEO group that they will be either in excess or in range of the 31.6 million per school distribution that the Big 12 got. In fact, I had one president tell me it was a layup. I had another tell me they were extremely confident. Anybody who tells you they haven't seen numbers hasn't been watching this. February and March, all of a sudden the tune changed. The presidents and chancellors started coming out and talking. Everybody remembers that. Robert Robbins at Arizona talked. Kurt Schultz at Washington State was talking. Oregon State's president came on my show and talked. And everybody came out because they had the numbers and they were looking at rough numbers going, hey, we're going to be okay. And so I think at that point, you kind of have to look at this and go, you feel like unless something dramatically shifts in the next couple of weeks, it looks like we're going to get some numbers. There's going to be pen to paper. And I think, look, like it or not, Colorado, if they want to be in Texas, do what Oregon's doing. Go play Texas Tech. They play a home and home with Texas Tech. Do what Utah's doing. They're playing Baylor. They're going into the state of Texas. You can play wherever you want. You're right about Coach Prime. I think the investment in football that Colorado, Rick George made, round of applause for a Pac-12 school that was viewed as a bottom feeder since it joined, making a move that is like a pivot saying, hey, we want to win. We want to matter. And I think Colorado's going to matter and be an important member of the Pac-12 for the next, at least the next foreseeable future.
Yeah, I think that was a program saving move. Not that their program was ever in jeopardy, but even if Coach Prime for some reason leaves, there's going to be coaches lined up because this Colorado program showed that they're invested in Colorado. I'm going to talk about, or we're going to talk about, John's going to talk as well, some more Pac-12 realignment or media rights stuff. But before we do, this episode is brought to you by Bird Dogs. Bird Dogs, they make you look good. They're the best shorts ever. Their stretch khaki shorts are designed to fit slimmer through the thigh and leg, give you a truly sculpted look. They do exactly the same thing as Lululemon, but they fit way better. They fit way better than regular shorts and are made of a strict restricting cotton. Bird Dogs fix the issue by inventing cloud knit fabric that looks just like khaki, but stretches so you can get a way slimmer fit. You can wear them anywhere. You can wear them to graduation. You can wear them to dinner. I wore them to play softball last Thursday. You can wear them to do pretty much everything. So if you want to wear your shorts too, go to birddogs.com/lockedoncollege. Enter promo code LockedOnCollege for a free Yeti style tumbler with your order. That's birddogs.com/lockedoncollege for a free Yeti style tumbler. You won't want to take your Bird Dogs off. We promise you. Go get your shorts. Okay. So we just talked about where Colorado stands in this future of the Pac-12, their talks with the Big 12 and all that. Let's talk about the Pac-12 media rights situation. You reported, was it 2 days ago now, that they had agreed to, basically verbally agreed, right?
Yes.
Okay. So people took that as that was them putting pen to paper, which they had not done yet. But I wanted to get your explanation for basically your report. I think a lot of people looked at the title and said, okay, they got their grant of rights, media rights deal done. We're done with this, but that's not the case, right?
No. And so look, there's two separate things here. And I think, and again, we go back to that educational piece that we talked about earlier. There's been like several moments of public service announcement, like Bob Thompson, the former Fox Sports Network's president, did like a public service in the early part talking about television households and, why the Denver TV market is more valuable than Pullman. And, it doesn't, your brand matters, your viewership matters, but what really matters is the TV households that you can bring into the fold. And it's, if Las Vegas had more TV households, the Pac-12 would be talking about them as an expansion candidate, not San Diego State. And that's what it's about. So yeah, grant of rights and media rights, two separate things. Now, I look at it like this, like the media rights agreement is a marriage certificate. You're marrying yourself as a conference to your media partners. The grant of rights is the engagement. Like you have to have agreement on a wedding planner, a caterer. You have to have agreement on how you're going to split your revenue, how your postseason revenue will be broken down. What rights are you selling? Are you selling data rights to potential gaming partners or TV partners? Are you including that in your media rights? Your sponsorship agreements, like what will Colorado sell in-house? What will they control? And what will the conference control? There's a whole bunch of this stuff that is not boilerplate. I keep hearing people say, oh, it's just boilerplate. It's not. It's a complex conversation. And so it's really important. Like the Big Ten had to do this. The SEC had to do this. The ACC had to do this. You need to get agreement verbally from everybody in the room. Hey, what are we selling? What are we including? What are we holding back? How are we going to divide that revenue? Because if you don't agree on all of those precursor items, you can't get to the media right part and just sign it and say we're done because you don't know how you're dividing that revenue. So it's really important. And it was a big step. They talked about this over several months. It's probably part of why the conversation took so long. Like we were watching the ACC and the Big 12 talk about incentivized postseason revenue sharing and, hey, you make the playoff, you get to keep a larger share. What do you do with the NCAA tournament units? How do those get distributed? If you're a basketball school, you've got a real vested interest in that. And so I think there were a lot of those discussions that were happening. So I reported this week that, they found agreement on all those topics. I'm told by multiple sources that they are in total agreement on revenue sharing. It will be equal revenue sharing. That's important because if you are Colorado, you will get the same amount of media rights revenue that Washington State gets, that Oregon State gets, that Stanford and Cal are getting, even though they're in a bigger media market. They could probably say, hey, we deserve a little more. So the conference has decided, the presidents and chancellors have decided to go with equal revenue sharing. Now, I think that's interesting because part of the reason why they lost USC and UCLA was they had equal revenue sharing, and they probably should have revisited that. So I thought that was kind of a landmark step. Like, hey, we're going to share equally. Oregon and Washington could have held out for more. Apparently, it didn't go that way. So what they did get, what Oregon, Washington, and Utah and the others like Colorado who are investing in football, they got a incentivized distribution on the CFP revenue. So these college football playoff berths are worth $6 million last year to the schools that made it. Now that revenue has traditionally been evenly divided among 12 members in the Pac-12, but 10 members, maybe some expansion members going forward. How they're going to break it down is going to be that whoever earns that berth and earns that money gets a larger share of it. So they're going to incentivize schools like Colorado to continue to invest in football. Colorado's done a fantastic job hiring a coach, investing in recruiting. They're reaping benefits at the stadium with season tickets and merchandise and, just the brand. But beyond that, if Coach Prime can get Colorado into the playoff, and keep in mind, when the playoff expands, that $6 million, the new TV contract, there are projections that it'll be 12 or 18 or 20 million, that those berths are going to be really lucrative. So keep an eye on that. And if you're Colorado, I think you celebrate that a little bit, because you go, hey, you got equal revenue sharing on the media front, and you got incentivized sharing on the CFP. And what didn't break for the basketball schools is that the NCAA tournament revenue will be divided equally still. And that's interesting. And, I thought Arizona might hold up there, but it appears as though, they're okay and Oregon's okay. The schools that have traditionally made the tournament are okay equally sharing, at least in this next deal. So once the grant of rights is done, and I'm told it is, now you pivot fully to the media rights stuff. And I think it's really interesting today, even, just before we came on here, Washington State heard testimony from Kirk Schultz, the president there. He has asked his regents for signatory authority. Now, a lot of the other schools already have the president or chancellor has that signatory approval. He said that he argued that, he needed it to get the media rights done. And he said it's coming in the next 2 weeks. I thought that was interesting that he gave that testimony. So it appears to me that grant of rights is done. And for those who are saying it doesn't mean anything, just step back. You don't get married without getting engaged, and that the media rights piece is moving to the finish line. Now, I will say this. If those numbers are not what the presidents and chancellors expect, there can be some pumping of the brakes. This deal could fall apart. That media rights deal is the glue of everything. So it's money. But I was interested to see that Washington State, as they gave projections to their regents today, I was looking at the numbers. They're projecting step ups in media rights revenue. And they projected it modestly, but I think they're doing that because they want to over deliver. So I think that, the Pac-12 is moving towards a deal. And I think, that grant of rights, really important piece of the puzzle. I asked Bob Thompson, the retired Fox president, I said, hey, from your standpoint, because he was on the other side of the table decade plus ago when the Pac-12 did its last deal. I said, from your standpoint, how does the grant of rights and the media rights work together? And he said, grant of rights is, they're not even tuned into it as a media partner, because that is already settled. That's happening on the conference side. And he said, basically, by the time we're having that negotiation and putting pen to paper, we are trusting that the conference has its stuff together. I'll leave it as stuff. They have their stuff together enough to assure them that, hey, we have the signatory authority to sell the media rights. So it all points to, 9, 10, 11 months. I've been saying the same thing. And I've been hearing all the noise out of the Big 12 footprint. I've been hearing a lot of noise in the Pac-12 footprint. The message has not changed. It has not really wavered internally. The external message, there's been, so-and-so is talking to so-and-so. They're vetting, Big Ten's vetting teams. Well, the Big Ten's vetting everybody. The Big Ten vetted every school before it took USC and UCLA.
I wrote an article about it. They vetted 10 programs. I wrote a whole article about every program.
They vetted everybody. Like I had Bob Thompson look at the media value of every Pac-12 school and say, okay, what are they worth? And he came back and he was like, hey, USC and UCLA, yeah, Big Ten wants them. They want LA. Oregon, Washington, they're worth like maybe 38, 40 million in media rights value each. Not enough. Not enough for the Big Ten to be interested. Like the Big Ten knows that. Like they know it way before I know it. Yeah. And so I think, this is all moving towards us getting back to talking football. But here's the thing, man, Kevin. I think in 2029, 2030, this will all kind of bubble up again.
Oh, yeah.
And UCLA, how happy are they in the Big Ten is going to bubble up too. And so, buckle up. I think we're all kind of headed there.
Yeah, and I think there are a couple things I want to touch on quickly before we moved on. First of all, I want to thank my listeners, my everydayers, as I call them, who tune in every single day, provide questions, provide comments. They don't really like my predictions for Colorado yet. I feel like season one, we're building. We'll get there. We're not at championship contention yet, but I appreciate my listeners and viewers. Just wanted to say that. There's a couple things I wanted to talk about. First, the Washington State aspect. I think it's interesting that they keep putting deadlines on things because I feel like the Pac-12 and deadlines, they're like a suggestion at this point that they ignore, is what I keep calling it. It's like when your teacher assigns homework and you're like, they'll let you turn it in early, and you're like, okay, I'm going to turn it in earlier, and the teacher's like, no one's asking you to do that, and then you don't do it, and the teacher's like, why didn't you do it? I feel like the Washington State is kind of putting expectations that aren't necessary on the Pac-12, and so I thought that was interesting. I wanted you to quickly touch on Arizona's Mike Robbins, I believe.
Robert Robbins.
Robert, thank you. He spoke with Paul Finebaum, and there was kind of some confusion, which is kind of where all of the backlash to you came. What was the confusion there with Finebaum and Robbins?
Well, I don't think Finebaum read my piece, first of all. I mean, it was evident in his line of questioning. He went immediately towards, you have a deal. There's no deal. There's nothing signed. This is a verbal agreement. It's grant of rights. I mean, I think the bigger question would be, hey, you haven't signed the media rights agreement yet. It appears there's a report out saying that you guys have agreement on your grant of rights verbally. Can you confirm that? He's not willing to go there. And he also, I thought it was really interesting. Like, I don't even think Robbins had read any of it. And, maybe it's, I'm writing at my own website, maybe, but I had it confirmed by multiple people in the room. Nobody's shooting it down. I just think Robbins was sort of addressing the tired question of, hey, do you have a deal done? No, they don't have a deal done. And, he claims he hasn't seen numbers. I think he's seen numbers.
So I know the phrasing of the question.
I think the phrasing of the question was bad. But, look, I host a radio show. I know sometimes I'm talking about things that I wish that I had time to read everything. Maybe Paul Finebaum's on air. He's getting fed this, this question in his ear. I don't know. I've got a lot of respect for him. But I also think, like, I was disappointed when I heard the way the question was asked, because I was like, yeah, you're not really asking the right question in the right way. So look, do they have a grant of rights agreement? Yes, 100%. They're in agreement. Do they have a deal? No, they don't have a deal, and they won't until everybody signs.
Yeah, and I think to give Paul Finebaum some slack, as a former production assistant for TV, I worked for the Pac-12 networks. We were in charge of like providing stats and information for the people on air. So they would be in charge of discussing it. So if someone gives them, not misinformation, because no one's obviously trying to give him the wrong information, but maybe they didn't explain it well enough. Okay. I think that's what kind of leads to that confusion. And obviously, Paul's an SEC guy, so I'm not sure how dialed into the Pac-12 world he is.
Well, also, Robbins referred to, he said there was a tweet from a reporter. Mm-hmm. And I think I don't know what he was referring to. I don't know if the reporter tweeted, he saw something where someone says a deal's done. I don't know. Mm-hmm. But, Robbins I think he's a smart guy. His background is he's a surgeon by his profession. I think his campus, he's done good things on his campus. But I think in the end, he did later in that interview sort of double down on the idea, hey, same thing everyone's saying, we want to be in the Pac-12. We need to see the numbers. And I think those numbers are going to be 31-6 in range of that. But I keep hearing that they're confident that they're going to beat that number. So I keep saying 32, 33. Is that what the distribution number is going to be?
Interesting. Okay. Speaking of numbers, we're going to talk about that when we come back. Travis Hunter was offered quite a few numbers to go play college football elsewhere. We're going to talk about that after the break. Welcome back. We are now talking about Travis Hunter. He was the #1 recruit. My former host, John Garcia, who is now off to greener pastures as Rivals national recruiting analyst, said that he was the best. He had the best ball skills he had ever seen at the high school level. There was no doubt why he was the #1 recruit. Was a longtime Florida State pledge, ended up flipping to Jackson State at the last second, went to Jackson State for the year. Obviously, Coach Prime took the Colorado job. And so Travis Hunter entered the portal. Everybody kind of knew. It was kind of like I'm sure John, even who is out there knowing all this about the Pac-12 media rights stuff, knows that Travis Hunter's probably following him to Colorado, Coach Prime, that is. And Travis Hunter kind of played it a little bit. He tweeted after he gets 100,000 subs, I think the number was on YouTube, he'd announce, and then he'd have videos with, what are they called? The little clip art where it'd be like Georgia, Colorado, Florida State at the cover picture. So there was some mystery. It's like, oh, is he actually going to Colorado? We don't know. Well, he ended up at Colorado, but not without offers by other programs. According to Deion Sanders, Coach Prime, yesterday when he spoke to Carl Reed of 24/7, he said that Travis was offered $1.5 million by other programs to transfer to their school. This was kind of confirmed in a way by Travis back when he was in the portal. He kind of tweeted at, I believe it was a Florida State recruit, that his coach wanted him over that recruit. He was like, he came calling for me again. So I don't know why you're acting, because the recruit threw some shade at him. That was the whole thing back in that time. But John, what does this tell you about college football, where we're at right now, and how good Travis Hunter is?
Yeah, it's unrestricted free agency every year. Between the portal and NIL, you have created unrestricted free agency, no salary cap, booster involvement. It's messy. And look, I don't blame Hunter. He's exploiting the system that is in front of him, and good for him. Like, if that's your kid, maybe you don't quite do it with, hey, I need the followers, but he probably got the followers. And I'm going to guess he got someone in his ear coaching him on that, saying, hey, what can you get out of this? Like, let's milk this process for all it is. But we've seen a number of players who jump in the portal just to see what's out there, to see the offers that are out there. The NIL world, we've just seen testimony in Washington, D.C. from the NCAA and others. They're trying to put guardrails on it. I don't know where it ends up, but I also don't blame Coach Prime for saying, hey, look, this guy got offered $1.5 million and he's still coming with me. That's a recruiting pitch. Like, everybody,
I didn't think about that. That's a great pitch.
Yeah, everybody's using the system to their advantage. The problem is, I think the programs, it hurts continuity with your program. Sometimes your fans, I don't know, I can't speak for your viewers, your listeners, how frustrated and fed up they are. Kind of, we all like to watch players develop and grow and see them go freshman to sophomore. I don't so much like the unrestricted feel to it in free agency. I wish there were maybe a little more guardrail on this, or maybe the window to transfer should be shorter, or maybe the school involvement should be more transparent. I do think, part of the problem is we don't know what some of the NIL deals are. We only suspect. I know Cam Ward, the quarterback at Washington State, got $90,000 deal. Okay, you got a pickup truck, you got some cash, you got airline tickets, you got an apartment, you got some, that's the deal he got. But what did Bo Nix get at Oregon? Nobody knows. What did Michael Penix Jr. get? Nobody knows. Can you imagine free agency in any sport where nobody knew the number? There's a reason that the NBA, NFL, Major League Baseball, there's salary cap involved and all of this. There's a reason it's out there and it's transparent. And so I think a lot of this is murky. And I think that's the big part of it that troubles me, at least initially. Beyond that, I don't want to see programs that don't have strong NIL collectives get left in the dust. And that's what's going to happen here in the short term. If your NIL collective is not on it, you're going to have some problems retaining your players, as Coach Prime is pointing out with Hunter, and also attracting new players. I think culture, ultimately, the teams and the programs that build great culture are having players stick. Oregon State only had 6 players jump in the portal and go to other schools. That was the lowest team in the conference. Utah was second. They had 8. You talk about those two programs, coaching staff continuity at both schools. Oregon State does not lose assistants, nor does Utah. So keep an eye on the assistant coaches at Colorado if you're a Colorado fan, because in addition to your NIL collective, having that continuity of staff seems to correlate with guys staying in your program and sticking it out.
Yeah, and that was actually one of the questions I received. I do a mailbag every Friday, which I'm only going to do like 1.5 questions because that kind of leads to my answer for one of them. Which Colorado coach is going to get the next head coaching job? And I think it's going to be Sean Lewis, the guy who was already a head coach and took the Colorado job despite being a head coach. But I want to touch on Travis Hunter a little more before I moved on. I think this just goes to show how good of a player Colorado fans or the program got in Travis Hunter. He is literally probably going to be the best receiver on the roster and the best corner on the roster. He's the closest thing to a true two-way player since Charles Woodson, I would say. We've had Miles Jack, we've had Adoree Jackson, but I don't think we'll ever see someone play as much of both sides as Travis Hunter will. I think he's projected to have a pretty large role on both sides, which is something to look out for. I don't know if we'll ever see it again. Who knows if it works with him, but that's kind of another pitch that Coach Prime has used with Travis Hunter is if you think you're so great at everything, come play everything here at Colorado. We want you to do that. And I think he's using the skill set of Hunter perfectly. And I think it's going to be a perfect kind of marriage between the two. And I'm excited for Buffs fans because I feel like they needed a good player like Hunter to come in and be the face of the program. Because while I think Coach Prime is the face of college football at the moment, I think Travis Hunter is the face of Colorado on the player level.
Yeah, Jack Coletto was at Oregon State in the last few years, right? I mean,
linebacker, yeah.
They did a fantastic job. He started as a quarterback, right? So he comes in as a quarterback. He ends up, by the time he's a senior, being your starting middle linebacker and short yardage running back / wildcat, threat on offense. And he threw passes, So it was an amazing job by Oregon State's coaching staff to take a really gifted player and say, we're going to squeeze and wring everything we can and let you be, as great as you can be. And I think that's a selling point. Like, talk about $1.5 million. That speaks a language, but also the confidence that, Coach Prime would have in saying, look, I'm going to allow you to come in here and win reps on the offensive side of the ball, win reps on the defensive side of the ball. There are some coaches out there that wouldn't let you do that. And I think, they would be worried, who are you taking playing time from somebody that I promised playing time to? But I think it really flies into the spirit of, hey, the best players are going to play.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think Travis has an opportunity to kind of prove himself to be one of the best players in college football this upcoming year. Coach Prime already said that he's probably going to be a top 5 pick or top 10 pick the next year. Before we go, I again want to thank you, John, for coming on. I had one really good question that I wanted to touch on. I have my answers here, John, and I guess you could just sit here for the ride for this minute. I was asked what programs had the best comeback after going 1-11 and hiring a new coach the following year. So I did some digging. I got Hawaii, and from 98 they went 0-12. And then 99 they hired June Jones and went 9-4, won a share of the WAC, and then they beat Oregon State. Unfortunately, sorry for the timing. They beat Oregon State in their bowl game. I think it was the Oahu Bowl at the time. UCF in 2015 went 0-12, and then 6-7 next year. And then they went on their run of 13-0, 12-1, 10-3 under Scott Frost and Josh Heupel. And then Cal in 2001, they went 1-10. They hired Jeff Tedford and went 7-5. And then I had to give honorable mention to USC this past year, who went 4-8, and then obviously won 11 games and were 3 defensive collapses away from making it to the playoff. John, tell the people where they could find you so they could find your work and know all these things that we talked about today.
Yeah, you can find me exclusively at johncanzano.com. Get a free subscription, get a paid subscription. I always tell people whatever works for you works for me. But, I just love covering this conference. And, I think it's going to, when we finally get to the football, I think it's going to be a great season. And, Colorado's obviously a big piece of that.
Yeah, Pac-12 is about to have arguably their most competitive season in a decade. And we've spent the whole year talking about what's going on in the boardroom. But you guys could come back Monday. I'll be talking about what Coach Prime said about Pat Narduzzi. We got a great episode ahead of us, and I appreciate John for joining us again. I will see you guys on Monday. Have a great weekend.